Kansas City, I think.
Yeah. Welcome everyone. Being again. We are welcome everyone to the third of the four panels of the Towards Braiding series. Today's topic is Indigenizing Spaces and Places. Welcome to those online and welcome to those here in person. Thank you for making it. My name is Sarah May Chitty. Wasazoanangkwe Nidishnikaz, Nagiknindodum, Michizakik Anishinaabe Kwayandao, Dushkanzibing Minwa, Alderville and Donjiba. So I just introduced myself in Anishinaabe Mwin. I'm the Curriculum and Pedagogy Advisor in the Office of Indigenous Initiatives at Western University. And I had the privilege of being able to sort of curate these conversations and panels. And what you see if you are here in person, the gallery walls based on the text Towards Braiding. And so the context of this panel, Indigenizing Places and Spaces, is when we have these conversations about like what it means to decolonize spaces or indigenize spaces. A lot of the times when it comes to like thinking about institutions, we're thinking about policies, we're thinking about curriculum, but then there is also the literal indigenization of place and space. And we're on Indigenous land, and so there's some layers because then you're thinking about like decolonizing because you're putting back what once was or creating something new with what exists now. And so the folks that are here today are all experts in their, they're like, Paula does not like the word expert, so I'm not going to say, yeah. They all bring experiences and stories of doing this kind of work is what I should say. And our lovely moderator, Sherry, will be leading the discussion. And so I'm going to hand it over to Sherry to introduce himself and as well to initiate the whole panel. So miigwech for being here.
All right, I'm going to take a few seconds to put this mic on my lapel before I continue. Like muted that so it didn't sound terrible on the recording. So Tanshi, Kiowao, hello everyone, I hope you're well. Sherry Osdinalt, Dishinakashun, Michif, Nia. Hi everybody, I'm Sherry Osdinalt. I'm Métis. I come from Western Canada. I am an artist, recently hired as an instructor at the University of Western Ontario in the Visual Arts Department. I do community work, and I am also a tattooer in the Indigenous Tattoo Revival Movement. And I am very excited to be here moderating, sort of hosting today, talking to these pros in their fields. Is that a better word? I hope it is. And yeah, I'm going to invite each of you to introduce yourselves so that you have the opportunity to use your language to contextualize yourselves how you wish. And then we'll move into a few questions. So maybe up to 5 minutes each if you want.
I want to meet the Indigenous, Taino Métis, Anishinaabe Kandao, Biowesa Indao, Kiskea, Kiwayne Kenora and Donjiba. My English name is Laura. What else about me? My dad is from the Dominican Republic, but the traditional name is Kiskea. My mom is from Kiwayne and Kenora, and I come from a long line of seed keepers, a long line of farmers. So that's where my gardening background comes from. And I'm hired with the Indigenous Initiatives Office at Western University. I take care of all of our gardens. We have 3 satellite gardens right now and 1 main garden at the Wampum Lodge. I'll tell you more about that in a little bit.
Hey, Sagolis what Gwega Hawani Niagets, Otoyuni, Niwagataloda, and the Agni Wagahajo. My name is Paula Cornelius Hedgepeth, and I am Wolf Clan from Oneida Nation of the Thames. I am Community Relations and Space Coordinator for the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, and I also am the lead at the Wampum Learning Lodge. So I've been working in community for many years outside of Western as well. I was working at the Greater Essex County District School Board, working with our students there and Indigenous community. So it is something that I really enjoy doing. And the work that I do now in creating space for our communities and doing the work to indigenize space, it all comes from, I think, my passion for taking care of community or elevating community and creating those spaces for them to thrive.
Bonjour, Nimkigis, Indigenizing Ajak and Dodum, Whitefish River First Nation, Dunjaba. My real name is Nimkigizis Thunder Day, and my English name is Mike Sanowink. I am an artist. More recently, over the past couple of years, a muralist, and they've just gotten bigger and bigger, and it's absolutely insane. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Originally from Whitefish River First Nation, which is up near Manitoulin Island. I lived there till I was like 20 or so, and then moved down to London. I currently, my life is going through this weird transition right now. For the past like 10 years or so, I've worked at Western out of the Center for School Mental Health, supporting Indigenous students throughout the school board at the high school level. And right now I'm just trying to, so I moved down to a part-time role at the school board to still kind of continue doing some of that work. But I'm trying to focus on my education and finishing up my degree. It was just too much with a full-time job, full-time art, and then part-time studies. It was just way too much. And I need to get some of that stuff off my plate because the art is going so good, and I don't want to burn myself out because I'm an old guy now and I want to enjoy some of this stuff. So yeah. So I'm also an uncle, a big brother, a big Red Wing fan, and I'm just thankful to be here and talk a little bit about my art and some of the projects I've done in terms of Indigenizing spaces. So, miigwech.
Thank you, everyone. It's good you're so tall since the murals are getting bigger. That's gotta help, right?
It is crazy.
Okay, so my first question, and this is sort of the longer body maybe of what we're getting into today, I'll address to each of you, and I've kind of tailored it to you. So for fun, I'm gonna start on the far end instead of always going in the same order. Mike, will you tell us more, because you just got into it a bit, about your work indigenizing places and spaces through murals, art making, and with a goal of reconciliation through creating with youth and students as well?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I could.
I'm just kidding. I'm good.
I took you seriously.
You guys always give me a hard time thinking I'm unprepared and stuff.
I just thought I was wordy.
Yeah, I'm a free spirit. Let me do my thing. So like I said, I originally started painting. Like when I was younger and stuff, I would always like doodle and draw and things like that. And the art was always kind of there, but it wasn't, it was more like me drawing things like Red Wing symbols and like Spider-Man and all those different types of things, right? Like any high school kid would do. So I kind of think back to like my notebooks and everything like that, and how all those different things would just be littered all throughout all my notes. And then as I kind of grew up and kind of started navigating and trying to figure out more about myself as an Anishinaabe, I started to kind of turn towards that side of the art. And it really helped me kind of learn more about who I am and learn more about my culture. I was working with the youth at the time when I first moved down here, and they would have questions, like cultural questions, and it always sucked just being like, I don't know. And I go ask the teacher and I come back and stuff like that. So I by no means am like this heavy cultural knowledge carrier, but I know what I know. And I'm very grateful for the ones that have passed on those teachings. So when I started getting more into the art, people would ask me questions about it and stuff, and they'd be like, so why'd you paint a turtle here? Why is there a bear there? And being an artist, I consider myself a storyteller. Always telling stories about our culture and how it kind of relates to the project at hand or the institute that it's going at, things like that. Kind of what I mean is like I'm doing one for the St. Thomas Police Service right now. So I'm going to put some bears in there because they're representative of protectors, right? So anyways, yeah, I started kind of navigating that way, and then a couple commissions started coming my way, and how it really kind of snowballed was I'm heavy into sports. You heard me talk about the Red Wings, and like used to play basketball and everything, and I hurt my back really bad. It was just old man stuff, like sciatica, I think it is, like nerve stuff. And if you ever had anything like that, it is absolutely terrible. And so I was out of commission. I had to go to like rehab and all that stuff, and physio and everything. And I wanted something positive to kind of fill that void, because like sports were just such a big part of my life, and just not just the actual playing of it, but like the teamwork and the goal setting, and just going to spend time with my friends and all that stuff. So I wanted something to fill that void, and some of you guys are probably pretty familiar with this. When you have something taken away from you that you love so much, and you have no control over it, sometimes people can go down like a destructive path or something not so positive. And I didn't want to do that, right? I didn't want to. I wanted to continue trying to lead a healthy, active lifestyle. So I kind of started taking up art and getting a little bit more serious about it. Like I said, a couple commissions started coming my way, and I was like, oh my God, I'm making money doing this. pretty amazing, because I never ever thought from a kid who's drawn Spider-Man on his doors to being here and selling some of my artwork. I got a couple uncles that are artists too, right? And I've seen their successes and I've seen their struggles, so I kind of wasn't sure if I wanted to venture down that route. But anyway, so my job and everything, and they just started getting bigger, working in the school board and stuff. They started providing me with more opportunities. Like, hey, Mike, this school's we kind of want to do a mural or something for like September 30th or something like that. And those were my first ones. They're kind of just like handed to me, like, would you like to take on this project? It's like, yes. And then this was years ago, like 8-9 years ago, probably. And then projects started getting bigger. And especially like to kind of relate back to like the indigenizing spaces and stuff. And a lot of the schools that I work in is supporting Indigenous students. So those students need to see themselves represented, like in the staff, on the walls, and within the schools, right? They don't just need that, they deserve it, right? So as those things kind of progress and stuff, I think about that Indigenous family that just moves to a town like London, kind of like what I did. And they go into the new school, like this Indigenous kid who's, might be scared or nervous to start at a new school, and then he sees like some of his culture on the walls, right? That's how I see it, and that's how I think about it. It gives them that connection to the school. So the murals just started getting crazier and bigger, and like, God, I gotta have like 20 or something murals in London alone. On last Thursday, it was a big one. It was easily my biggest project to date. I painted, so my art career has allowed me, this past summer, I won this commission for this job. They all aren't handed to me, right? Like, I put in that work, and I put in these called artists and stuff like that, and ideas, and I had to go for an interview, and I had to do like a PowerPoint and all that stuff, and I was shortlisted for this last project, and I went in, did the interview and stuff, and anyway, so my art career, like this past summer, I hired 4 Indigenous high school students to help me paint this 36-foot mural. And like I said, man, drawing Spider-Man on the back of my door to being able to give 4 Indigenous youth full-time summer jobs with my art, it's mind-blowing. It's crazy. It's so crazy to me. But yeah, last Thursday I unveiled this 36-foot mural at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo. That was a pretty big event. There's a lot of community stuff that kind of went into it, and like kind of going back to the storytelling thing. We had community input sessions where I met with people that like go to school there, that work there, Indigenous students and all that, and kind of like, what do you guys want to see? Like, what kind of story are we going to tell? Again, for those Indigenous students who are first going to university and are, leaving home, leaving a community, their home community, which could be anywhere, and they come into a place like Laurier and they see this big mural. It's just like, oh, okay, so this institute and this school is actually putting forth an effort to try and make me feel welcome, or to try and decolonize, or kind of create that space, that visual space for Indigenous people and students. And I get it, this reconciliation thing is massive, right? It's tough, this decolonizing and everything. And the art and stuff is just one piece of the puzzle, right? Like there's so many different facets and so many different things that go into trying to make these places better for Indigenous people. But I think the art is a big one. Obviously, I'm an artist. I want to keep getting work and keep getting jobs. So yeah, it's probably the biggest one now that I think about it. But so the murals, I painted a bus recently, just a whole bunch of different projects. I'm like booked up till February right now with a couple other projects, and it's just I'm very appreciative and very humble about it. But on the other hand, I know I put in that work, you know, and I tried to walk that good path and be a good person and do things like this where I can get my name out there, and you know what I mean? So on one hand, I'm extremely humble about it, but on the other one, I just know that I have paid my dues, right? Like, I don't know how many paintings I got sitting at home that I haven't sold. They're just sitting there type thing. You know what I mean? Like, take the good with the bad. And right now, it's a good spot. So that was a lot. I told you.
It was, yeah, but that's great. Like I said, that's sort of like the body of getting the chance to kind of hear what everyone's about here.
Did I answer your question or no?
I think you did.
Okay, yeah.
And just because it's something that I really enjoyed when I was reading about the work that you've been doing, as a small follow-up, thinking about kind of creating those spaces and making visibility. One of the things that you said about your artwork in a quote is that like it's bold and it's colorful, and I think it's kind of joyous, and I think that that's something that can be really meaningful to bring into these sort of reconciliation conversations. And I just wonder if there's anything you'd like to say about that, kind of like making space that's not only for Indigenous people and about reconciliation, but joyful.
Yeah, I've been experimenting and stuff lately with kind of trying to go away from the colorful stuff, but that's what people like and that's what people want.
Oh.
And, but no, it's experimenting. It's just like expanding my toolkit, right? It's like that's what people like and that's what people want. So and I love all the colors and stuff like that too. I agree. I think like especially around times like this where it's September 30th, things can be pretty heavy for Indigenous people, Indigenous communities, Indigenous allies, everybody, right? It's not a joyous time. And as much as we try and put a positive spin on things and try and be happy about it, there's still that weight that we're carrying, right? So yeah, I just want my art to be happy and people to look at it and go like, that's so sick. You know, that guy's pretty awesome. People will be happy.
Like, as an artist too, I understand. I'm pumped when somebody's like, that's so sick.
Yeah, right? Like, oh man, straight banger after banger.
But you know, if you go down that like other aesthetic path too, like everybody's favorite band eventually releases like the artistic album that you're like, well, I'm happy for you, but it's maybe not what I was here for, but I'm happy for you. So you can do that too.
What's your favorite band?
I am picking's hard. That's a good question. I'll think about it and maybe get back to it later. Yeah, okay, let's go.
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh, is that real?
Oh, yeah. Look, I wrote about it up there.
Wow.
One of my artistic dreams is to create an album cover for the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
And we're conveniently
Everybody's
going to go
like,
on to the next.
Wouldn't that be so sick?
That would be great.
Yeah. I have two big
Teasing
artistic
you.
dreams, and that's one of them. Don't tell anyone.
Okay, it's a secret, don't worry. So moving on from the topic of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Paula, will you tell us about your work developing and launching the Wampum Learning Lodge as an Indigenous-specific cultural and learning space on a university campus, and how you incorporated community consultation in that process?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would have to say, first of all, that I can't take credit for a lot of it. When I came to Western in 2019, the process of finding a space on campus had already been started by Candace Brunette-Debossigay and a team of Indigenous staff and faculty that were already there. So the work had already started, and that was already identified at Western that there were not enough Indigenous spaces for our students on that campus. And that was through consultation, through surveys and focus groups on campus. So there's always that community involvement when we're looking at needs and doing an assessment of what the gaps are and what is needed by our staff, students, and faculty. So that work was already started. When I got there in 2019, then my job was really to kind of step in and assist Candace and take some of the things off her plate when it came to moving this project along. So we had started a call out for Indigenous architects and architects that are local to the area to help us create this vision and this space that we wanted for our students and staff, faculty, and community. So a big portion of it was community engagement. So when we did select our Indigenous architect, who is Wanda Dalla Costa, and I go through all of this, I've done so many tours at the Wampum Learning Lodge, and I kind of have this scripted in my head. But so one of the things that I always make sure to mention is that Wanda Dalla Costa is the first Indigenous woman architect in Canada. She is from Saddle Lake Cree Nation, but currently teaches in Santa Fe. Santa Fe, yeah. So she was selected as the Indigenous architect, and one of the things that we're always mindful of was making sure that we were incorporating the culture and the ways of being and knowing of the three nations that are in this area, so the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Lenape. But also being mindful that Western attracts students from across Turtle Island and Indigenous students from across Turtle Island. And we wanted every student that came into that space, every Indigenous student, to see some part of themselves in that space and to be able to look at, whatever it might be and think to themselves, yeah, that's what that is. Like the copper banding that's around the Wampum the welcoming wall. As you walk in to the front reception area, there's a greeting wall, and they're panels that have the greetings in the languages, and they're wrapped in copper. And when you walk in there, you can think, you'll think copper, water, we're honoring the water there. And not everybody will know that as they walk into that space, but many Indigenous nations do know that. That's how we carry water, that's how we honor water. There's that relation there. So it's just little things like that. But in the process of it, Wanda wanted to make sure, and we all wanted to make sure that we were engaging with the community, with our students. And so we had a lot of community engagement sessions where we brought everybody together. We had focus groups, we had surveys, and we went on tours through the community and just gathered as much information about the individual cultures, the languages, as much information as we could get, so that Wanda could create this space. So that's what we did. We did all of these things. She gathered all this information and created this space that was very inclusive of the three local nations, and then also thinking about how to incorporate other aspects of cultures from the different nations across Canada. I think she did a wonderful job with it. So there's so many things that even like we opened up the space. We've been through multiple tours, and even not even as recent as a couple of months ago, I'm still learning things about the space or learning about aspects of what other students see when they look at the space. So I'm not sure if people are familiar with the outdoor arbor where the sacred fire is. I had a student point out to me that something that they saw within that they identified with that I don't know if Wanda had done it intentionally and I just missed that, but it was something that they saw that they connected to their culture. Within that structure, there's many elements within that arbor that can be identified by different nations. So that was one thing, but the practice of indigenizing that space and upon opening it and making it a protected space that was a journey in itself. And getting to the point where we were ready to open it up and making sure that we had all of this space ready for our students, for our Indigenous community at Western. Thinking that we had, thought of all of the things that we were going to need in order to welcome our community into the space. And then opening the doors and welcoming everybody in through a 1-week opening ceremony. And then getting through that and kind of settling down into the space ourselves and just getting to the work of what that space was intended for. So the intention is a very intentional space. It's a space for truth and reconciliation, for the work of truth and reconciliation, for indigenization and decolonization. I always like to add in cultural reclamation. as well. For me, that's probably the most important part of what that space is intended for. Not to say that the other work isn't important, but there was a lot that was taken from our Indigenous communities, our Indigenous nations through colonization. A lot of things that had to be put down and hidden, or in some cases lost. But there were practices amongst our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and our ancestors where they held on to those and they practiced them in private or in secret, or they just passed down these recipes or these traditions or these ways of being and knowing orally through the generations, through story. And those are still things that are still alive. So one of the things that we attempt to do within the lodge is to bring those in through programming where we can reintroduce those things to community. It could be something like basket weaving, or learning how to identify medicines, and then if we identify the medicines, how do we utilize those medicines into teas or salves or whatever, however we can use them as medicine, or just things like that. So I think that that's one thing that is really important to me in that space. But getting back to the actual journey of opening the space, we wanted to make sure that the intention of the space was protected. It was, like I said, it was for a specific purpose. That space itself is a retrofit. It used to be a library for the Faculty of Education, Althouse College, right? So it's attached to the Faculty of Ed, and students were often, that's where they would go to study and utilize that space and hang out. And so when the Indigenous learning space at the time was, wasn't even the Office of Indigenous Initiatives at the time, but through the process of searching for more space for Indigenous community at Western, they were given that space to turn into the new Indigenous learning space, more intentional space for the Indigenous community. So that the process began, right? We started the community engagement, we started the renovations, we started, all of that, the grand opening, getting through all that, getting into the space, settling down, knowing what our purpose was in that space. But then the journey was educating others about the intention of the space. Even though that was put out there, through Western News, through the Gazette, through different media stories, the understanding still was not really there, I guess, that the space was intentional. And this is like hindsight, or hindsight is 2020, where we probably should have done a better job of communicating what the space was made for. But upon settling into the space, we had to start educating people about the true intention of the space. It wasn't just a space to come and hang out and utilize and study. We wanted to make sure that students knew that when you enter this space, there has to be this understanding that you're coming there to learn or unlearn, about Canadian history, about Indigenous people. You're coming there with a specific purpose of educating yourself through the programming, through the events that we host, through the speaker series, whatever it might be that is being hosted in that space. That's what the space is for. So it's been a journey. We've been in there for almost a year now. Our opening date was November 7th of last year. And like I said, we had a whole week of events. But I think we're getting to a point. We still have instances where there is education needed amongst some of our students. We're right smack in the middle of two residential halls. So we are getting the communication out there to those students about the purpose of the space and getting them to understand and respect, the intention of the space. But these are first-year students, so it's not probably not the easiest thing for them to comprehend. I don't know, but all we can do is just keep putting it out there and keep talking to them. We tried different things in order to accomplish that. Let me see. Did I answer your question?
I think you did. Yeah.
All that to say is that it's been a journey, and it's still an ongoing journey. I think that because we have new students coming in every year, we're always going to be, and that's the purpose of the space. So there's no, I'm not saying anything
I think
to be discouraged about that, but it's like that's what we're there for, is to educate. So,
I think
and that's
that
the intention of the space.
ongoing journey and like any sort of action of indigenizing or even, more ambitiously like decolonizing, like it's always ongoing, right? Because even ourselves, we're always kind of learning about what we need or might need to communicate. But I do think that, also it brings me to reflecting on that one of the really important roles of non-Indigenous people in reconciliation is listening. And I hope for lots of listening in the future.
Listening and actually taking it in, like, and processing
like really
it.
listening.
Yeah. But I like what you said. Like Sarah May was when she called us an expert. I don't like that word, and she mentioned that. But that was just a teaching that I received from some of my elders years ago, that we're always on a journey of learning, right? So nobody can be considered an expert because there's always something new to learn, always something new to be shared with you. And I for myself, I'm always learning something new from different people or the elders around me, or whoever the Western community is. Well, so I don't know. Just thought I'd share that as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And so, Laura, will you tell us about your work as a, I would say, local leader in restoring native plant species and revitalizing and sharing practices of growing culturally significant medicines and foods?
Yeah. The biggest thing as I walked to the front door, I see they're pulling up all these things that they assume to be weeds. Meanwhile, these are not weeds. These are valuable medicines that were given to us. And, it's okay if you don't have that knowledge. But if you do, you're called to action. You're called to use these medicines in a proper way, and you're called to pick them in a respectful way. You're called to care for these medicines in a respectful way. And I think about even the trees around us. The trees take in so much of the crud in the air. We need to be a lot nicer to the trees. We should hug them and say thank you. Say, I'm so thankful that you're here, taking on all of the crud in the air and giving me oxygen to breathe. And reconnecting ourselves with creation and what that really means is, of course, individual to each person, but collectively speaking, it's gardening resurgence. It's the awareness that, of course, grocery prices are going up, but our citizens should have the ability to just go in their backyard or go to their windowsill and grab a bushel of lettuce leaves to put into their sandwich. I think that there are so many possibilities from really wonderful technologies and sciences and really cool organizations like TD Bank gives you free trees. That's pretty cool, man. I don't know about you guys, but I just say yes. I don't even have a house. I just say yes, you can get the tree. And then I'll go put it somewhere secret because that's just another tree to be caring for us. And I also think about our youth and how wonderful it is to have youth in the garden with me and say, I know maybe you had a rough week, but let's water this plant and water ourselves at the same time. And as each pour or each time you have to go back and get some water, think of something new. Think of a new way you can re-envision that dilemma in your life. And And that reconnection that we can offer our youth is so fruitful, for lack of a better word. But I also think that it's more than that. Every morsel of First Nations reservation land makes up 0.5% of Canada's landmass.
Small.
So, of course, when families are faced with, the decision of which property they may pick to situate their families on, they're going to go for cost. They're going to go for necessity's sake. But I think of all of the amazing gardens that I've seen and of the amazing capacity that one garden has to fuel that family. Even a 10 by 10 lot, you can put so many different things in that family. Everything that even your children love, to things that you need maybe to provide for your family in terms of medicines and stuff like that. But I always think of Indigenous gardening is getting more Indigenous people gardening. That's Indigenous gardening, right?
Yeah.
I love to do consultations. I love going into community and saying, working with community members and saying, okay, so this is the land that you've got. How can we make this work? What kind of fruits do you not like? So we're obviously not going to put that in your garden. What kind of fruits do you love? What kind of things, what kind of ailments does your family have that you may need to be cautious of in terms of these plants? And it's that ongoing work and that ongoing care that can come from garden work and from land work, that I think that it's something that we need to elevate a lot more for our citizens. I think, if you're not, on the land harvesting from your garden, you should be hunting in the off months. And that's our traditional way. And I always think about returning to those traditional ways of having your 10 by 10 garden for your 6 months of the growing season, and then pickling, canning, preserving those items as best as you can in your cold room, and then hunting to provide for your family on the off months. Because that's what will keep us healthy. That's what keeps us well, our traditional ways.
I think that learning from plants is so significant too. I really loved how you described that, because I feel like I'm always learning from different kind of plants that I'm harvesting or living alongside, or even, the spider webs that I see on the plants outside my door when I leave my house, like learning about structural integrity.
Yeah, and every season is going to offer you different things. It's going to offer you different challenges, different successes, but it's about rolling with those punches and learning how to be on the land is the most integral part of that.
So some of the tangible ways that I've seen work that I know that you've been involved in spaces that I've existed in is like there's near where the sort of garden beds are, near the building that I'm in on Western's campus, there's that beautiful area that has like the native pollinator species that I think you told me one time had just been sort of like grass and kind of meaningless. Will you talk a bit about the work of bringing native pollinator species into a space that was kind of doing nothing?
Yeah, absolutely. So that area, if you're familiar with the Western campus, just where the visual arts department and the biology building kind of meet halfway, there's these gorgeous greenhouse spaces, and the community garden is right there as well. If you go just maybe 10 feet in the other direction, that beautiful stretch of biodiversity that we're trying to achieve was just a piece of grass. And that project was really, really wonderful. And the next step of that, it was wonderful installing all of these native species. But the next step that I really wanted of that project that didn't quite get there was the language integration. The Indigenous names for every single item in that garden are available to us, but we didn't have the capacity, the funds, what have you, to do that right then and there.
Yeah.
Even though I think that would have given it that, bringing it up that next level to really fully integrate indigeneity into
that space.
our work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool for me to know, is something to maybe like aspire to, as someone who sees that space all the time and really admires it and sees other people admiring it, which is like such a treat. And then also, because it came up earlier today and it sounds really impressive, will you talk about like the 3,000 ears of corn you've been growing and are expecting, and where you're headed with that?
Yeah, so the biggest, I guess, like reconciliation piece that I've been working on alongside Paula's my boss, if you guys didn't know that. But it's the White Corn Project, and we have one of our associates with us as well. Lynn is a non-Indigenous person, but she takes care of a lot of the science kind of aspects, where Paula and I, we bring the cultural kind of knowledge, where the other folks, they're the allies. They bring that scientific knowledge to us. But that piece is really, really important, because that was a revolutionary moment in land back for me. As a gardener, I can have all these extravagant wishes and all of these things that I want in a utopia, but I can't do any of those things if I don't have a garden, the land to do so. So with AAFC, it was just a 10 by 10 lot that started as just a medicines garden, a Three Sisters lot last season. And then moving into this season, we thought to ourselves, okay, what's the next step? What's phase 3? What does that look like? And that is moving White Corn Project into community. I don't want to say back into community, because many people have not lost this. However, many people have, which is the sad reality. So bringing white corn back into community, it's that land back, it's that resources back, it's the knowledge back, and what that looks like for the community to say, hey, we can do this. We need to rally together, rally our support together, rally these resources together for us to have this. And I see other communities that do this in terms of like elderberry sodas and all these really wonderful types of possibilities. And I think of that for the Oneida Nation, and I think of that for Chippewa of the Thames and our local, Muncie, Delaware. That's a part of land that can be utilized in such a wonderful way.
And so just so everybody else kind of knows, my understanding is that you've grown 3,000 ears of white corn that you're in the process of drying for seed, and then that seed is going to allow you to spread that corn even farther to more people.
Yeah, this year has gone so fruitfully that I'm hoping that we don't have to do another season of seed. And
wow.
It's, hopefully going to be stepping into that next level.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. So thank you all for telling everyone about the amazing work that you do. For my sort of next question, it's going to be a bit more conversational, talk in any order you want. I won't address each of you at once. But I'm thinking about these sorts of indigenizing and perhaps even decolonizing roles that each of you are taking on, and that it's something that we would really love, I think, as Indigenous peoples across different communities, to see more people getting into. And so I'm wondering if you want to talk to kind of how you got your feet into indigenizing places and spaces, and how others might start doing that sort of work if they're interested in it, if anything comes to mind.
I'll go. I just kind of think about my own path and stuff, and what really kind of got me going heavily into the art stuff was just kind of my culture and who I am as an Anishinaabe. Like I said earlier, I wanted to learn more about who I am and more about the teachings and about that path. When I was in high school, I wasn't into that at all. I was just obsessed with basketball, sports. I was obsessed with sports and girls and all that stuff. Your typical high school guy, right? But the cultural piece of who I was wasn't there. It was always available to me. My parents they would always smudge every morning and all that stuff, and they would try to use the language, the stuff that they knew, and they're walking that path of sobriety, and all those pieces. So it was always there, but it just wasn't there for me. And as I've been working with Indigenous youth over the past 10 years, Some students just aren't ready, right? Some people just aren't ready to explore that side of themselves. Some students come from a very strong cultural background, and some don't, right? And so I was kind of like in the middle. I was exposed to it. We go to powwows, all that stuff, but I just wasn't into it. But the more I started working with youth, the more I started reconnecting with culture and trying to explore that side of who I am, that has really helped kind of drive my art and the creation process, and just like noticing things that I never noticed before in terms of things like the land and the trees and the plants and everything, and taking this one course with this absolutely phenomenal professor, and he's so wicked, and he's right here. So, but every Friday morning, we go out and we're working in this kind of, it's kind of down near, it's off campus a little bit, but we spend our entire 4 hours in the morning out in the bush, and that is the absolute best. Like we're going there and we're working with plants and stuff like that, and I just like, that is the best way to like start the day, being out on the land. And it's one of the big things for me too about that is that like it's not just Indigenous students in that class, right? Like a lot of this work about reconciliation and decolonization is a lot of Indigenous people putting that work in. So I'm so grateful when I see a lot of non-Indigenous people at these things and taking this class and doing this type of stuff. It definitely helps, and that's kind of, what were we talking about?
Getting into
Getting into
up.
it. Yeah. So kind of just like reconnecting or trying to connect with who I am has really helped and has really driven my artwork. And I continue to, I'm so thankful to be in education because I get a lot of opportunities to listen to a lot of elders and knowledge carriers and be parts of these different things where I can learn more, and I just kind of soak it in, and my iPhone, like I take notes and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea for potentially a painting, right? Like going back to the storytelling, telling a story. How can I visually tell that story? And yeah, so for me, it's just been like kind of reconnecting and learning more about who I am, and just kind of going out there and trying to put yourself out there as like an emerging artist. I remember I was saying yes to everything. I was saying, yes, I'll do this. Yes, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll try this commission. Yeah, I'll do that. And like it was a lot, and I still kind of have that problem. I tend to get too many things on my plate at once, and like I know, like as an artist and like that's my source of income and stuff like that, that's a good problem to have. But there's times like just recently, like September 30th, I said yes to a lot of things and being a part of a lot of different events, and I carry a lot of responsibility with that. And sometimes I just got to take a step back and be like, you know what, like this is supposed to be like a healing day, right? Like it's supposed to like not be putting in all this work and take some time for me as well. And sometimes you guys, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's just sometimes it's a lot. And so I think I'm still kind of like trying to navigate that, and it's okay to say no sometimes and that type of stuff. But I just like my culture and that connection to culture and trying to share those stories visually is kind of what's kind of driving me, right?
I really appreciate like thinking about connecting to culture, connecting to land, but also holding boundaries and space for yourself so you can foster those connections. Is there anything either of you want to kind of add to that?
Yeah, I guess I would just say that my journey has been, well, it started kind of the same, like connecting to culture, and I grew up in my community. Like we moved there when I was 5, and I stayed there till I was like 20-ish, and not really connecting to my own culture during that time because I wasn't brought up with it, even though it was there in the community, but not being raised with it because, for residential schools and stuff. But so not having that connection, but moving away and doing my own thing and then coming back later and reconnecting to it. And that's what at that point is when, I start working in the education system and connecting to an urban Indigenous community and working with youth and working with the families and developing that, I guess, that passion for helping our youth and our students connect to their own culture in any way that I could. Knowing for myself that connection to culture is so important for our own well-being, mental well-being, our identity and our growth. And recognizing for myself that I struggled for a long time because I didn't have that. It wasn't until I had my first son and identifying the fact that I didn't have that connection, I struggled because of it, and wanting my son to know who he was and for him to have that connection to culture. So that's when I went back to my community. We went back to Longhouse and, had that not back to Longhouse because I never did go to Longhouse. I knew of it, but knowing that I wanted my son to know, started going to Longhouse and connecting with people, connecting with the elders and the clan mothers and the faith keepers and asking questions and just going to every ceremony and learning and immersing ourselves in that and immersing my son in it. So those things I know are important, and that's what I wanted. That's where my passion for that developed and grew, and knowing that I wanted the youth in Windsor, the Indigenous youth, to have that same connection. So making those connections where I could for them, and then coming to Western and further developing and growing my passion for community and identifying, working at an institution such as Western that is so prominent, I guess. And there are a lot of resources available to Western. And just being in this position, my goal is to help elevate, like I said it earlier, to elevate our communities through those resources that I have access to now that I'm in this position. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like those are really important steps for me. Like just making sure, like I love my communities and I want them to succeed and thrive. And a lot of them, they're doing the work, but there's still a lot of struggle there as well. So things like the White Corn Revitalization Project, where like that's a passion of mine, and Lynn helped get that started. I was talking to Pam earlier too, and she's part of the program where we had students help us write that proposal to get that going. So that's what I mean, like these resources are available to me to do this type of work, to elevate community. So
and something that's really resonating for me with what both of you have said so far is sort of having the experience of not having something there and having letting that guide you to create sort of, maybe it's Indigenous visibility through art, or create spaces that are nurturing and reconnect to culture because you didn't have it. And I feel that has guided a lot of sort of what I've tried to do too, and that really reverberates. Laura, is there anything you want to add?
I agree massively.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, of course.
I just like going back to the art thing. I think growth is such a huge part of that, and like kind of for like those emerging artists and stuff like that, and always trying to expand your toolkit and to not continuously like try and design or paint or whatever the same thing over and over. And I think that's such a big part of it, and not just in art but in life too, right? To continue that growth and maybe look at things from a different lens and a different viewpoint. And like for example, like the past couple of years I got into more digital stuff, right? And it just opened so many different doors for me. And back in the day I would have never thought about like drawing and creating on an iPad, but now it's like such a big part. I always start out my projects with that, and that's just that growth and that trying to expand and to continue working that type of stuff. It's like a guy like LeBron James, he's won everything, but you think he's he's done working. No, he's still out there and still at practice. I'm not a LeBron fan, but like he's still like, you know, putting in that work to continue to be great and stuff. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of vulnerability that comes with sort of putting yourself out there to get opportunities and taking them. And, you know, especially not to single you out here, Laura, but like as the sort of youngest person on the panel, you're the person who's kind of entered most recently into taking on these sort of community. I'm sorry, but I see some grays and
What time is this over?
we
man?
respect our elders. I'm kidding, that was too much.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Good thing you and I work on like different ends of campus, so you can't hold this against me. Most newly, in your role of getting to support this indigenizing and creating spaces and places, to harken back to the panel sort of title, is there any maybe advice you'd give for someone who's like trying to find footing or wants to open themselves up to getting such a position?
The boundaries.
Yeah, nice.
It's especially, you know, working in my 6-month window, it's hard to ever say no to things. You know, I have to say, maybe a better way that I can put that boundary is set. I don't know if my plants will allow me to do that today. Because if I'm not well in my own self, I cannot take care of the plants, and then the plants cannot take care of the community members. And I notice that sometimes in my work, that I get overwhelmed and I get, you know, I feel the system a lot of the time, but I always remind myself, I do this for the plants. I do this for community. I do this for betterment, and not getting bogged down by all of these opportunities, as wonderful as they may be. Sometimes the best thing, and I think of trees, I guess.
Yeah.
The 2-row. Me saying no is not me cutting that. Me saying no is me staying on my purple lane.
Yeah.
And me wanting to continue me on that red road. And what that looks like is saying no a lot of the time, is putting those boundaries intentionally, because I only have 6 months of the year to provide, right? And I cannot do that if I'm not my best self.
That's, I think, a really great point. And, you know, there's, with topics like reconciliation so kind of visible right now, there are sometimes a lot of asks. And so it's really important and really great advice for anyone who wants to kind of take on this sort of work, to have boundaries and to maybe let the growing season guide you about when you need to focus on your garden and being in connection like that. I appreciate that a lot. So we've got about 10 minutes left before I'm going to open questions to other folks. And the last question that I want to ask the three of you, that you can answer in kind of, again, any conversational order you want, is that it's worth noting that opportunities to indigenize or even decolonize often involve working with institutions and funders that aren't Indigenous. So with the goal of highlighting how those who ask us to do these sorts of roles can do better, what are some challenges or obstacles you've run into, and how you might suggest organizations, institutions, and funders can do better supporting that work?
Well, you want to go? Well, I heard you grunt, so I'm just like, oh, this is going to be a big one.
Well, I just think that working in Western and the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, a brand new office, it was advocated for because there's a lot of work to be done in the area of truth, in the era of truth and reconciliation. We are a small team. There are approximately 7 of us in the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, and then, you know, the Indigenous Student Center has 9, but they are very student-facing. The rest of us are campus facing. And there's, 6, 7 of us to service the entire campus. So I would say that we are all burnt out. Our mental health isn't always the greatest. We are exhausted. There's all these demands and these expectations that are put on our office to indigenize, to decolonize, to advance the work of truth and reconciliation, to advance the Indigenous Strategic Plan, to advance Western at 150, to build relationship with the Indigenous community, there's just so many demands. But they want all of these things, but there is no funding. Like Christy is always advocating for more funding to hire more people, because we are at capacity. We've been at capacity for so long, and just trying to do our best to create all of these opportunities for learning, for unlearning, for just trying to do what we can. And I think, as a team we do a really good job. But there are so many things in my inbox, like emails that get buried at times, or I think to myself one day, okay, I got to get back to that email, and then I get to my desk and there's like 10, 20, 30 other emails that are just as equally as important. But so I don't get to that email that was sent 2 days, 3 weeks ago, or whatever it might be, but doesn't mean that it's not important to me. But those are the types of things, like if I could say Western needs to do better, or any organization that wants to help, and I think that the intention is good, it's pure, there's a basic understanding there, but I think that there needs to be more education around certain things. I just recently, I have to find funding to help operate the Wampum Learning Lodge. So I'm putting out proposals for grant money, and the things that are important to Indigenous communities, Indigenous people, are not important to other people, because they don't understand, the importance of our languages to us and how connected that is to our culture, to our own, our identity. So in a proposal, I'm trying to explain, it's very important that we have funding for this type of programming for language revitalization. And it can't be just a one-off. It can't be just a 1 year or 2 year funding program. It has to be continual. In order to create a fluent speaker, you have to have 5,000 hours of immersion. But that wasn't important to them. That was one thing that didn't even make it to the top 3 of the funding thing. So when they came back and said, this is the things that we're interested in, and all of them were important, but I was really hoping that the language thing was going to, the ongoing language thing was going to get picked, but it didn't. So there's just things like that. I think there has to be a really good understanding of when you're talking to Indigenous communities, Indigenous leadership, or whoever it might be, you really have to listen to what they're saying, what they're expressing, and just, I don't know, educate yourselves, educate themselves. We can't do this work with small teams. It's just too massive. We need the funding, we need the understanding, and we need the education.
Yeah, and there's so much history there, right? That we would hope that any kind of institution can really understand how they need to support so much work. I think of the fact that getting, a university degree used to disenfranchise you, so you would no longer be status, right? No longer be Indigenous in the eyes of the government. So, yeah, it would be the dream, I guess, that the amount of support to kind of reconcile could be proportionate to the amount that has kind of gone in the opposite direction, whatever the opposite of reconciliation is. Yeah. Is there anything that either of you wanted to sort of add as far as challenges or obstacles
I had two of them, but Paula took one of them, so I guess I'll just elaborate on it. No, I think I loved all the things that you said, and like I view this from like so many different lenses, right? Like I am a student at Western. I was an employee there for 10 years. I'm an artist. I'm a member of the Indigenous community, and I see all this work kind of going through and stuff, and I think like a really important one is like, if you're going to invite Indigenous people to sit at the table, to sit at those decision-making tables, it's important to listen, right? It's one thing to check off that checkbox or whatever, you know, and say, oh, we invited a whole bunch of Indigenous people, but then you don't take any of the ideas and thoughts and those types of things into consideration when important decisions are being made for Indigenous students and the communities. So I think that's a big one. Don't just invite them just to say that they're there. You know, there's a wealth of knowledge for the people that are actually invited to these conversations and these decision making things. Yeah. So I hate that whole checkbox thing.
Yeah.
I think another one too, like being an artist is like. And somebody who is like, so I over the past like 10 years, I've run so many different events and things for our students and stuff. And one of the worst things that I absolutely despise is like when we have elders come in, for example, and they're a part of some of our stuffs and doing our openings and things like that. And it's like, thank you for coming. We super appreciate it. We're going to pay you in 6 weeks. You know, I absolutely, I cannot stand that. And I think there must be a better system in place to pay the artists and pay the people. Because like for somebody like me, like a lot of the times I'm paying out of pocket. You know, I spend $1,000 to get ready to prep for this mural, more than that, right? And it's just like, okay, well, you know, you nice to have that money back, that type of stuff. And so I think there definitely needs to be a better system put in place so I don't have to tell that elder, you know, like, pay in 5 weeks, 6 weeks, or whatever. It's the absolute worst. And especially nowadays, and with the way things are and how expensive things are, and you never know, right? Like we all don't come from the same background, and maybe that person had to borrow $40 just to get to town, and they're expecting to get paid that day. And then it's like they get told they gotta wait 6 weeks, that type of stuff. I think that definitely needs to be changed for whoever's institute or whoever's listening out there. It's kind of a big one.
Yeah. It's a really important point.
Yeah.
And
Hey,
compensating
man.
people well.
Hey. It's funny because like I'm complaining about this, but I did this project for Paula like last year, and she sent me texts and emails. She's like, "Hey, Mike, you gonna send that invoice? You gonna send that invoice?" I was like, "Oh yeah." And she was hounding me to submit my invoice.
Trying to pay him.
I know. She's like, how much do we owe you? I was like, well, like 20 grand. Wasn't that. Anyways, but no, like for real, back to serious. That's a for real thing.
I know a very well-shown, well-exhibited, widely exhibited Indigenous artist who I think took over 2 years to get paid by a prominent Canadian gallery. And so it's a huge issue. And it's really important to flag because people need to live.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add?
Sentiments from my youngest sister.
Ooh.
She always loves to remind me in situations like that. Oh, just tell them, be my friend first. And then things will come after that. Once you're my friend, you understand my needs, you understand my background, you understand my life trajectory, and then you can help from there if I need help. You know, I think it's pumping the brakes a little bit and saying, be my friend first.
Yeah.
And then we'll get to the work.
Thank you for bringing in some advice from the youth. Yeah. Is there anything else you two want to add on this topic before we look at maybe some audience questions or comments?
I just love that, what she just said.
Yeah, it made me really happy too. Dang.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things, like the first steps is relationship building, and I don't even think that that's come up yet, but that is very important. is creating those relationships and those friendships. But
Yeah.
thanks for the reminder.
Helps you understand the person a little bit better. And especially in terms of things like value systems. You talked a little bit about that. And things that are important to us might not be important to you. But if you're serious about reconciliation and making things better, you'll understand and respect those value systems, even if they are different.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump around a little. I have a small question from our online audience, and I think it'll be pretty easy to answer probably. Mike, what is the class you were talking about that's mostly on the land? Someone wants to know.
Oh God, I don't even know the name. What's the name of it, man?
If you say it, I'll repeat it. I've got a microphone.
Okay, in all fairness, like Rick, one of the a huge ally and support for Indigenous students and stuff at Western, he's like, Mike, you would love this class. It's with Des, he's absolutely fantastic. And I was like, I wanted to take it last year, but like I said, I was just way too busy. So this year I was like, okay, that was one of the, I wanted to make sure that it was still on Fridays, first of all. And I was like, okay, I'll keep my Friday mornings open because but it's like this land-based. It's like a mix between like Indigenous studies and geography.
Yeah.
And it's about native plants. We've talked so far. Okay, so far all he's been doing is putting us to work with like these shovels and digging stuff up. So we're just like, and I have been reading. I have read the braiding sweetgrass and stuff. And
I know I can ask the source, so I'll repeat it into the mic if that works for you.
Sure.
What's the course called? Somebody clearly wants to take
It's got
it.
several names, but probably the best name is a field course in land healing and responsibility.
All right.
land healing. That's what I.
So a field
trying to think of the
course in land healing and responsibility for our online friends who didn't have the mic to hear that. And then to kind of move back and forth, does anyone in the audience want to ask the next question? And I will bring you a microphone if you do. Yeah, be right there.
Hello. My question is about like how do you incorporate, or do you incorporate, or are you mindful of building in sovereignty in these spaces as well? That's kind of something that's always on my mind with my role, and a big piece of that of like wanting to incorporate sovereignty when we're indigenizing spaces, because that should sort of, well, in my opinion, like when we're talking about reconciliation, like that's a big part of it. Because as Laura mentioned, we was Sarah at the beginning, we're on Indigenous land, right? So as we're sort of bringing these spaces back to like their original sources, is that something that you think about, when you're doing the art, or like with the Wampum Lounge, like all of that?
Mm-hmm. I would say that with the Wampum Learning Lodge, with our journey of identifying this space as an intentional space, we had to come up with new policy for that space because we wanted to protect it. So in order to, I guess, protect our sovereignty as an Indigenous staff in that space and protecting it for our Indigenous community, we wanted to run that space the way we saw fit and not have to, adhere to other Western policies that say that every space on campus should be open to every student. This space was intended for a specific purpose. It was built for our Indigenous community, right? And in order to maintain that, we had to really fight for that and say, no, this is how this space is going to run, and this is why. And so that's still an ongoing thing. Still, we still have to not really fight, but explain or educate on an ongoing basis. So that's kind of one way that we've worked through that at the Wampum Learning Lodge. Laura might talk about this later, but the other thing is with sovereignty, working with the White Corn Revitalization Project, that was a big part of why we started that project. The ultimate goal is bringing food sovereignty back into community. When that project started, for me, it was about hearing stories about my grandfathers or my great grandfathers and their friends, I guess, like it would be other community members at that time who were farmers. They had been given plots of land on the reservation and were told, this is what you're supposed to do with it. Now you're going to be farmers. You're going to farm the land. You're going to be agricultural, whatever the word is. I don't know, but and they did it really well. They were very successful farmers. They cultivated the land, they harvested it, and they were so good that they were better than the non-Indigenous farmers in the area, and they didn't like that. So because there was that competition from the Oneida farmers in the area, and I think it applies to Chippewa too, but they complained to the Indian agent at the time, and the Indian agents came in and they wiped out all of those farms, burned their livestock, burned their farms, deemed their livestock diseased or whatever, and took them. My great-grandfather at the time, everything was taken from him. He didn't see the point in trying to rebuild it because they would have just done the same thing to him again. So he ended up selling off all of that land. He had I don't know how many acres there, but I remember hearing that story and just thinking, like, I want to get back to that. I want to bring that back to community. And I have a friend who's doing the same thing, Angie Antone, who has, Mother Earth Farms? So she has cattle there, she has dairy, she has chickens and goats and all this. And so she's kind of on the same journey there, but she's done that all on her own. But I wanted to bring this white corn back into community because all of that land that was originally being farmed by the Oneida people, having it being taken away from them, now all of that land is being farmed by non-Indigenous people. It's leased out, right? So we have all of this field corn and soy and pesticides and all of this garbage being leached into our soil, into our water systems. So my goal is for people to really see that, what is possible, to bring back that knowledge into our community, starting with white corn. The other thing is white corn is there's a few people that still grow it, but not in large quantities. It's for personal use, but a lot of people don't. So there's a non-Indigenous farmer about an hour and a half to 2 hours away that a lot of our people are dependent on when it comes to white corn. And white corn is a staple for our people. But yet we're dependent on non-Indigenous farmers in order to get it. So that was a big thing with this project, is bringing it back so that we can depend on ourselves in order to do it, to have it and grow it and use it for everything. There's so many teachings that we've learned in the process, because there was a lot of community engagement with that project too, and just learning all the different ways that we utilized this white corn, not just for corn soup and cornbread, but just they used to use the byproduct of boiling white corn to feed babies. It was like formula. I know, there's so many things to learn and to bring that sovereignty back into community. So that was one example.
I think that's a really powerful, tangible representation of how sovereignty can play a role there. Was there anything you wanted to add, Mike?
I don't know what sovereignty means. I was trying to Google it when you were talking.
I'm sorry.
I never know if he's
I thought
kidding or
this was a safe space.
It is. We just all had to figure out if you were joking for a second there.
Joking.
Stop it.
I think it can mean a lot of different things in different contexts. Like when we're talking about food sovereignty, it's a bit different when we're talking about a sovereign state government, but there's overlap. So it's kind of, I think at base, like having genuine control in the hands, in this context, of Indigenous people with these projects. So say with the gardening spaces, if Laura was being told, well, we know that you want to do this garden that has all of these local pollinator plants, but you can't do this one because we don't like that it spreads easy. Like that wouldn't really be giving the sovereignty over that project to Laura.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think like in that, now that I learned a new word today, I feel like I've been pretty sovereign in my craft. I feel like all the like different institutes and agencies and everybody has kind of given me full, complete control type thing over everything. Like there's a lot of like community work and stuff that goes into it first, and that type of like student voice and things like that. But I feel pretty fortunate because they usually just like do your thing type stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that can be sort of one of the luxuries of being an artist is people like, I don't know, you have these wild, cool ideas. We'll just let you figure it out.
Yeah. I can't say there's ever been a situation where they're like, ugh, type thing, you know what I mean? Like,
That's
it's
good.
like, yeah. I don't like turtles or whatever.
So I have a few other questions from our online audience and comments, and I'm going to share a comment and then maybe a question so that we get a question from online, and then I'll see if anyone else in the physical room wants to ask something. So first, this comment is from UOFA, which is Union Associated with Western, for those who don't know, and it was directed to Paula from Jeff Tennant. He says, I so appreciate your observations on the insufficient funding of OII. It shows how much better Western needs to do. I hear it when I listen to colleagues talk about insufficient support for Indigenous studies as well. What you say about language resonates so much. Non-Indigenous faculty need to listen and advocate to the administration for more support for this work. So, sharing that comment. And then we have a question from Trisha Rawlake. Recently, the term indigenization has had a negative connotation with our local mentors and knowledge keepers, as in their words, it sounds like the sprinkling over colonization. In most recent learning, the word used is revitalization, as this has been explained, as they have explained that the culture is already there, it's just not being used. What are your thoughts on maybe revitalization versus indigenization?
I understand completely because, and even more recently, I saw a post or a meme, I'm not even sure, but it said, don't center, like if you start with decolonization and indigenization, you're centering colonization. Mm-hmm. So I understand that 110%, but at one point, is it semantics? And at what point do we just need to get it done?
Yeah.
Because revitalization, whatever the other one was, to me, they're one and the same.
Yeah, the work's the most important part for you, not the semantics. Anything either of you want to add on that?
I just think that I said it earlier too. Like for the artwork, it's just one piece of the puzzle, right? Of the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I hope. I'm a big believer in intentions. So when these institutes and these different places hire me to come in and do some Indigenous artwork, I don't want them to feel like I did my part. I did my part for the entire Indigenous community. I just feel like that's part of the work that needs to be done and that continued work that needs to be done. So I just think that that representation does matter, and that representation is so important for the communities and for the youth, especially the ones that are coming next and the ones that'll eventually be up here in this spot doing this type of work, right? So yeah, I think revitalization is beautiful.
Maybe hearkening back to what you mentioned earlier, Paula, about your work being ongoing. It's important for those who are asking us to indigenize places and spaces, to know that their work is ongoing too. It's not a one and done kind of situation. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just thinking about the two terms, if there's a difference or not. Like when I think about indigenization, I think about indigenization of colonial spaces, right? Whereas reclamation is, to me, it's the process of picking up those pieces by Indigenous people, which is much more important to me. Yeah. But not to say that indigenization of a colonial space isn't important either. Like when you go into these spaces, at Western, for example, like we're working on a project at Thames Hall, or the project that you worked on at Thames Hall, right? When our Indigenous students go into these spaces and they see, you know, something that they kind of identify with, like, okay, there's a part of me in this space. Like maybe I actually belong in this space. Maybe I can stay here for 4 years. Maybe I can stay here for 3 years and be okay in this space. You know, I think it's important to have those, and for that reason. But yeah, cultural reclamation, like I said that earlier, like that is the most important piece for me. Is I'm not here to specifically indigenize. Like I don't know that we can totally indigenize a campus like Western or decolonize a campus like Western, but the goal for me is to strengthen our Indigenous communities through the resources that Western avails to me.
Kind of building those, going back to that relationship piece that you guys talked about earlier, like building those relationships with non-Indigenous people as well, right? They see a piece of artwork, they may ask questions or want to know more about what different pieces and different elements mean.
Yeah.
So that relationship building and walking forward together. I love how art has the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to build on that too, like that's the other piece is, like it has the tendency to educate too. Like people will ask questions. Well, what does that mean? Why is that there? And hopefully they ask those questions, and there's a learning opportunity there to learn about the culture.
And I think that example was a great way of pointing out how, you know, indigenizing, in air quotes or not, can also like overlap with reclaiming and revitalizing, because it does in some ways claim that space and make it more comfortable for people. And so I saw a hand waving at the back of the room, which might want to be our last question.
No, that's the last question.
Oh,
Is lunch here?
well, how, I mean, maybe someone who's in charge wants to tell me how strictly we're stopping at past. Okay. Is there anyone in the room who has a question that they want to get in before we sort of wrap up? Yeah.
Hi, it's more just sort of like a comment, because I can hear you about, say, with the burnout and it's how important it is for people who are working in organizations to come and spend time over time in order to make relationships. So it doesn't, so that you can have better relationships with, like, say, our galleries, museums, other, in the universities and things like that. But it's changing. It's changing pretty slowly. It could go faster, but I know that, say, for funding bodies, for museums and galleries, and I also at the university, where it's not enough. It needs to change and change more and faster. But the idea of the sort of the American-like funding and neoliberal and very capitalist funding structures, where you have to have monetized outputs and all these kinds of things that you have to do, is often standing in the way. And job descriptions where they can change so that even inside, let alone outside, like the organization, can share and trust more, right? So to get our house in order, for everybody's house in order. So, yeah.
I think that's a great comment. It reminds me of a I was asked once how the visual arts department was decolonizing, and I was like, I don't know, like ask my colleagues. I just got here. Like, you know, and I'm the only Indigenous person. I'm not sure that's on me to figure out, or at least Indigenous to Turtle Island. So I'm going to maybe conclude then with a few sort of lovely comments that we've gotten online. And so first, I want to say from Gloria Henrik Lalibert, not a question, just that I am from Chippewa of the Thames and have lived and worked in the North for over 30 years. And I love to hear about the work that's being done in the South. So just some appreciation for all of you. And from Katie Willem, really enjoying the panel today. Had a few laugh out loud moments. Miigwech to hosts and panelists. I thought those were some maybe lovely concluding notes. Yeah, thank you all.
We're good?
Sarah May, do you got to come wrap up or something, or you wanted your question?
Yeah, I was like,
Well, I want to know what your question was now.
well, I just kind of wanted to tie some things together that were brought up throughout. And I just see, and you know, I know, sorry, everyone wants to like run out, but a big part of like bringing you folks together is to think about, I loved what you said, Mike, about the little, how art is one piece of it, you know, and these kinds of things. And I think about, when we think about this work of that question of indigenizing, decolonizing, and I think people still really think about it in this really narrow scope, and that question of sovereignty. And, you know, Laura brought up food sovereignty, and Paula brought up food sovereignty, but I'm just thinking about the plants, the sovereignty of the plants. So when we're designing spaces and we're creating spaces and we're in a space and we're not thinking about all who live within it, and we're not thinking about the sovereignty of all who are present in that space, and we're designing things, I think about, you know, especially Southwestern Ontario and like these heavily populated urban areas, which, you know, I think about my ancestors being in these territories, and I'm like, would they even recognize it, right? Because what they experienced is no longer here, and everything is being built up and built on without Indigenous consultation, without Indigenous perspectives, without the perspective of the plants, of the animals, of our non-human kin. And so I really encourage people to think about the words that these incredible humans have said today, and sort of pull and go beyond this idea of like, indigenization is not just like a policy. It's like literally thinking about the whole, this whole ecosystem that we're a part of, and the world that we're a part of, and what kind of world we're creating around us when we don't see ourselves represented in it, when our ancestors aren't represented, when our kin are being bulldozed over for what? Something that's going to decay in 100, 200 years, and those trees will still stand. So I'll leave you with that. And miigwech to Sherry for hosting this panel and taking the load off of you. You did awesome. It was Sherry's first time moderating, so tell her how great of a job she did.
Yeah.
Sorry.